send these two guys. I'm coming. So they're the advanced team, and they go out and they're move 3. This is when the old tone. Changes. This is the part of the story. I don't like this part of the movie. I don't like how Satan schemes. You have people, Demetrius and these artisans, and they're clueless. They're worshiping Artemis. Which is nothing. This false goddess of fertility, and it's nothing. It's no value. They're making it. How do you make a god? Come on. He brings that up in just a minute. So they don't know, but then you have the spiritual realm. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. You have this real area of battle that is going on, and they want in. They want in from their realm into our realm. You go, okay, how does that happen? How does that cross and their realm becomes into our realm? It's when sin in us. You read in James how, a lot of times we're blaming everything on Satan. Well, it's on us. The sin that is in us takes root, okay, and brings about death. It's in chapter 1 of James. So we see here what's the port of entry that comes from there, the heavenlies, into this group? Greed. See, there are these sins that mankind has. Anger, lust, slothfulness. Mankind calls them, the church has called them the 7 deadly sins. It's just kind of grouping these characteristics that everything kind of comes off of, is all it is. But greed is here in this example. If you go back and you look in places where Paul was dealing with the Pharisees, what was it? It was their pride, their jealousy. Those were the things that got a hold of the Pharisees, which allowed the enemy to work in them and through them towards Paul. But here, it's greed. And so now, these people, this sin in their life has opened them up for the enemy to counterattack at Paul and the territory that God is gaining in lifting up his word. So it says he brought in a lot of business. He tells them that we receive a good income from this business. So the 7 deadly sins, again, this is just a grouping. You have pride, you have greed, you have lust, you have envy, you have gluttony, which also includes drinking, wrath, and slothfulness. These are all things that mankind, unfortunately, you see come about. And when we allow these things to fester and to take root in our heart, it brings about bad things. And it allows for an opening for the enemy to move through. I feel like one time God gave me like maybe a picture of how the enemy moves at times. Have you ever had someone that you don't even know that just like spewed out vitriol at you, just anger or hatred or whatever, and you're like scratching your head and you're like, what was all that about? They don't even know me. I don't even know them, and then there's this, And to me, I felt like this picture God gave me, it's like they're just standing there, and the enemy just comes up behind them and goes on the back of the head and just, It just came out. They were an open vessel in the moment because they're not under the covering of the Lord. They're not walking in obedience to him. And so now there's this that just comes out. And you see here this evil that comes out through Demetrius and through these people, and this counterattack by the enemy in the heavenly realms. Okay, so let's go back to verse 26. It says, Demetrius continues on, he says, and you see and hear how this fellow Paul has convinced and led astray large numbers of people here in Ephesus and in practically the whole province of Asia. Now, this next statement is almost comical to me. He says that gods made by human hands are no gods at all. What is he thinking? He says that gods made by human hands are no gods at all. How stupid of a statement could you make? A human who makes something and then looks at it and goes, oh, that's a god. That's foolish. I mean, that's just dumb. How could that become a god? That doesn't even make sense, does it? Now, we do it. We do it. I'm sorry to say. We give things God's place many times. But it is foolish. I think we could all agree as a believer that is foolish. If you look in Romans chapter 1, verses 21 through 23, it says, for although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God, nor gave thanks to him. So when all mankind knows he's there, all of them, God says there's no excuse. Every person on the planet has no excuse because God has made himself known to them. All of them. That's pretty amazing, isn't it? Yeah, that's because he's God. And that's what he does. He does amazing stuff. But anyway, it says that when they don't recognize him and they don't glorify him and they don't give him thanks, and it says, but their thinking became futile. When we close the door to recognizing he is, common sense turns off. You know, you look at things and you go, where is common sense? Where is it gone? Well, there it goes. That's where it went. When you take away just the understanding that God is God, you just became nonsensical. And logic left. It says their thinking became futile. And their foolish hearts are darkened. They can't see it. So it helps me to look at this because there's times where I get so angry and so frustrated. I'm like, how do they not see it? Well, right there. That's how. So take a deep breath, big boy. Quit, just getting mad at them. They can't see it. They can't. It's impossible until they recognize he's God. So that's where we go in our steps. Oh, okay, this is how that we attack this situation. Quit arguing about all these other areas that they're being nonsensical and futile and foolish, and let's go to the root. Let's go back to, how do you think we got here? Who's in charge? Who made you? Why are you here? Those things. Attack those things. Because now they're arguing against him. And as God does his work, he'll open the doors of their eyes. And he'll enlighten their heart. And they'll step into an understanding of, oh yeah, you've been there all along. And they'll not be futile in their thinking. It says, although they claimed to be wise, they became fools. And they exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images made to look like mortal human beings. So in this case, it was Artemis. Back in Egypt, it was the calf. It says mortal human beings and birds and animals and reptiles. It's just what people do. When they say he's not there, then they come up with a substitute. Stuff, things, people, gods, goddesses. Because the thinking becomes futile. Okay? So that's what's going on. He says, Paul says that what men make with their hands, they're not gods at all. What a ridiculous statement. All right, so we go back to verse 27 of chapter 19. Back to Demetrius talking. It says, there is danger not only that our trade will lose its good name, but also that the temple of the great goddess Artemis will be discredited. He doesn't give a rat's tail about all that. What's he getting hit with? Money. He's losing his income. And the goddess herself, who is worshipped throughout the province of Asia and the world, will be robbed of her divine majesty. He sounds all glowing and like he's doing something important. It's hitting his pocket. He's losing his livelihood. His profit margin's being cut. And so he's saying all this stuff. So let's look at the last statement. He says, and she, Artemis, will be robbed of her divine majesty. Are you kidding me? If she's divine, can you rob them of their majesty? No. We're human. If she's a god, or a goddess in this case, she can't be robbed of that by us. God cannot be robbed of who he is, no matter what anyone says. People can rail against him, they can curse him, they can shake their fist at him or whatever. He's still God. Doesn't change anything. He's not threatened, quite frankly, at all. He's still God. Cannot rob him. Now, it may be blasphemy. It may make us sick to our stomach to hear people talk like that, but it hadn't taken anything from God because he's God. You know, there's a story I had to put in here, insert in here, out of 1 Samuel chapter 5. It's one of my favorite stories in all of the Bible. I love it. 1 Samuel chapter 5, verses 1 through 4. I'm going to read you 4 verses. You got to go back and read more about it later. It's so awesome. 1 Samuel 5, 1 through 4. There is one true God. So it says, I'll give you a quick backstory. The Ark of the Covenant has been taken by the Philistines. The reason it's been taken is because the Israelites were so bad. They were so not serving God. This is in Samuel's time when, God says there's going to be a time when everyone who hears the news is going to shake. It's going to mess with them because he's going to shake what's going on. People are so not following God. So the Ark of the Covenant is with the Philistines. It says, after the Philistines had captured the Ark of God, they took it from Ebenezer to Ashdod. Then they carried the Ark into Dagon's temple. All right, their god was Dagon. And they take the Ark of the Covenant in there, and they set it beside Dagon, their god. And when the people of Ashdod rose early the next day, there was Dagon, fallen on his face on the ground before the Ark of the Lord. Man, that fires me up. I like that. And they took Dagon, took their god, and, let's put him back up here. It says they put him back in his place. They stand him up, prop him up, because they had made him. Verse 4, but the following morning when they arose, there was Dagon, fallen on his face on the ground before the Ark of the Lord. His head and his hands had been broken off and were lying on the threshold. Only his body remained. Now, you need to read the rest of the story. Chapter 6 is awesome also, and how the ark goes back to the Israelites, and the Israelites hadn't done a darn thing to return, to get it back. God just did it because he's God. You can't take away his divinity. You can't take away his majesty. And here's Demetrius, we got to stop this guy because he's robbing her of her divinity. Come on. That's letting us know already. All right, so we're back to Acts 19. Acts 19, verses 28 and 29. It says, when they heard this, they're furious. Okay, here again, we have an open portal. So you got all these people, they don't have a clue what he's talking about. They don't know. He's mad because he's going to get his pocketbook hurt. Probably some of them are as well. They get furious. One of the 7 deadly sins, wrath, anger. God talks to us about it. Don't allow anger to carry on, right? That is not godly. So they're furious and they begin shouting, great is Artemis of the Ephesians. And soon the whole city's in an uproar. And the people, they seize Gaius and Aristarchus, Paul's traveling companions from Macedonia, and all of them rushed into the theater together. It's a mob scene. It's chaos. Everything is erupting. The enemy is at work. Oh, is he at work? We continue on. Verse 30 and 31. Paul wanted to appear before the crowd, but the disciples would not let him. Even some of the officials of the province friends of Paul sent him a message begging him not to venture into the theater. These guys, they're actually having discernment. Paul, in his heart for his guys who have been taken in there and his desire to fix it, he's going to go throw himself into harm's way. And the other believers are like, nope, you're not going there. No. Even Paul needed somebody to go, not today. Not today. This isn't the time and the place. Not today. He was going to have a day in Rome one day, but that day was not the day. And it's important to have those around you. We are not unaware of Satan's schemes. And it's important to have brothers and sisters in Christ that can be there with you, that if it's time to run into the theater, you go, here we go. And when it's not, you go, not today. I don't witness to that being what he is saying right now. There's a difference. It's not about courage. It's not about, being bold or whatever. It's about being led by the Spirit. And in this case, God says, not today. You're not going in there. Okay, so we move on to 32 through 34. It says, the assembly was in confusion. Imagine that. That's one of the ways the enemy works. He gets everybody stirred up, fans the flame, gets everybody yelling, screaming, running around. They don't even know what's going on. They don't even know why they're there. It says some were shouting one thing, some another. Most of the people didn't even know why they were there. That's crazy. I think we can see it. We can see it in things that have happened, events in recent years where you're going, ooh, that was chaos. That was madness. That's a sign of the enemy. We are not unaware of Satan's schemes. These are signs of the enemy. There's confusion going on. Verse 33, the Jews and the crowd pushed Alexander to the front, and they shout instructions to him. He motions for silence in order to make a defense before the people. But when they realized he was a Jew, they all shouted in unison for 2 hours. Great is Artemis of the Ephesians. Now, how powerful is that? Okay. After 2 hours, I bet they were all like, okay, well, let's go home. I don't know what that accomplished. They're all in there chanting and yelling and screaming, and they're caught up in the moment. And so we see things of the enemy. He's working in confusion. The people don't know, they don't even know why they're there. There's no purpose. The enemy has ultimately no purpose but to steal, kill, and destroy. There's no ultimate purpose of good or something that's going to come out of this. It's destruction. That's what he's shooting for. And the third thing is emotion. He's working in emotion, and he gets them all in this fever pitch to where they're following him blindly. You ever watched any of the old newsreels of Hitler and the Nazis and all the people and thousands upon thousands, and they're doing their walk and throwing their hand up and they're yelling and screaming and caught up in the moment. They don't even know what he stood for. They didn't realize what it was he was doing. Now, I want to say something about this emotion thing, okay? Because emotion in and of itself is not wrong. God created emotion. The enemy can manipulate emotion. There are some times that people, when God moves, he moves, and they're very emotional, then they'll look back on it and go, I think I was just caught up in my emotion. Not necessarily. It is to be discerned by the Spirit. Because God can move in and through your emotion. Emotion is not wrong or right. But it can go wrong or right. We see here that it was wrong. But emotion can be a very positive thing. I think it's important to understand that as you're trying to discern and asking God to give you wisdom on which way this is. Okay? So that's just something to file away when we're sorting through and asking God to let us know, is this the enemy? Is this you moving? What's going on here? Okay? All right. Verses 35 through 36. We're getting closer. 41's the finish. All right. It says, the city clerk quieted the crowd and said, fellow Ephesians, doesn't all the world know that the city of Ephesus is the guardian of the temple of the great Artemis and her image, which fell from heaven? You know, I'd hate to have been standing there. Bam! You know, hit in the head with a big image that fell from heaven. I don't know. Anyway, fell from heaven. Therefore, since these facts are undeniable, you ought to calm down and not do anything rash. Now, here's this other part about the enemy and how he does things. As he tries to move in chaos, as he tries in confusion, as he tries to move with no purpose. His end game is kill, steal, and destroy. He tries to move in emotion. He runs out of steam. There's no dynamism in him. There is none. All he can do is take things that God has created, which is dynamic because there's life in them, and distort them. That's all he can do. He has no end game but to kill, steal, and destroy. And so we see these people in this major outbreak of the enemy. No small disturbance came about against the way. This is no small thing. This is a big deal. And if you were in it and watching it play out and all that, you could get really disturbed and not know where it's going. And is Paul going to get killed today? And are we all going to get killed today? And where is this leading? And eventually it's going to run out of steam. Now, where it runs out of steam, I don't know. We have to trust to God. It's not like Paul didn't give his life. So it's not like we get to go, oh, okay, well, I can just trust that eventually the enemy will run out of whatever it is he's doing and I won't get bothered. No, it doesn't say that. I'm talking about in the end game, the eternal end game. The enemy, he has nothing left. He runs out. And that's what you see here. And they're chanting and they're, great is Artemis of Ephesians. I mean, I would love to see the end of it. As they all, after 2 hours, kind of were just standing there looking at each other going, gosh, I'm hungry, and they just kind of left. I mean, that had to have been an awkward thing there at the finish because nothing was accomplished. Nothing got accomplished here. We look at 37 through 39. This guy continues. He says, you have brought these men here, though they have neither robbed temples nor blasphemed our goddess. So truth stood. Your accusations, they came to nothing because they didn't do that. They didn't do it. There's verse 38. If then Demetrius and his fellow craftsmen have a grievance against anybody, the courts are opened and there are proconsuls. And everybody's looking around going, oh yeah. Yeah, well, I guess they could do that, They can press charges. If there is anything further you want to bring up, it must be settled in legal assembly. Everybody starts nodding and, out they go. That's the end of it. That was the enemy. That was his thing that he was doing. Okay, now, we're going to look at 40 and 41. It says, as it is, we are in danger of being charged with writing because of what happened today. In this case, we would not be able to account for this commotion since there is no reason for it. And after he said this, he dismissed the assembly. There you go. Much ado about nothing. That's the enemy at work in his long game. So when we go back to this, we're not unaware of Satan's schemes. We take a look in Ephesians 6. Interesting, he's writing to who in Ephesians? people in Ephesus, right? Who were we just chanting? Great is Artemis of the Ephesians. How about that? Okay? They would know about spiritual warfare. They watched it play out in the theater. And he says, finally, in verses 10 through 13 of chapter 6, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Now, what happens many times, I believe, in churches is talking about spiritual warfare almost becomes faddish. And it becomes something where we get to feel empowered and, we're going to go get the bad guys, and we get frustrated with the things that are going on in our world and the physical, and we don't really know what to do about all that, except, okay, we'll vote. Time that doesn't work either, or at least half the time. And so, there's this mess, and so now we're going to get all revved up and talk about the spiritual realm, and we're going to defeat the enemy and all that, and we're missing some very, very important components in how to go about doing this. It says, let's make sure we understand what verse 10 says.